I never thought I'd be thankful for being a history teacher obsessed with local newspaper archives until the day my mother-in-law destroyed my wedding dress. The vintage 1950s lace gown had belonged to my grandmother. I'd spent months carefully restoring it, replacing delicate beadwork and adjusting the fit. It wasn't the designer dress my future mother-in-law, Patricia Matthews, expected her son's bride to wear, but it was perfect to me. Or at least it was, until Patricia decided to take matters into her own hands. "I can't believe you're still planning to wear that secondhand rag." Patricia's voice dripped with disdain as she walked into the small bridal boutique where I was having my final fitting. I hadn't invited her, but Patricia had a way of inserting herself where she wasn't wanted. I stood on the fitting platform, admiring how the restored dress hugged my curves perfectly. My best friend Emma sat nearby, tears in her eyes as she watched me twirl. The moment was perfect until Patricia arrived, designer handbag swinging from her arm, disapproval radiating from every pore. "It's my grandmother's dress," I explained for what felt like the 100th time. "She wore it when she married my grandfather in 1956. Their marriage lasted 52 years. Yes, well, Patricia sniffed. Times were different then. People had lower expectations. The Matthews family has certain standards to maintain. I caught Emma rolling her eyes in the mirror. We'd all grown used to Patricia's constant reminders about the prestigious Matthews family name. You'd think they were royalty instead of owners of a successful car dealership chain. "The dress is beautiful," Emma defended. "Kate's put so much work into restoring it." Patricia ignored her, circling me like a shark sizing up its prey. "Daniel deserves to see his bride in something worthy of the occasion, not some yellowed hand-me-down." "Mom," Daniel's voice came from the boutique entrance. "What are you doing here?" My heart sank. Daniel wasn't supposed to be here. It was bad luck for the groom to see the dress before the wedding. But before I could duck behind the changing screen, Patricia made her move. "I'm preventing a family embarrassment," she declared, reaching into her designer bag. Everything seemed to move in slow motion as she pulled out a bottle and unscrewed the cap. The sharp smell of bleach filled the air. "Mom?" "No," Daniel shouted, but it was too late. Patricia appended the bottle over my dress, the caustic liquid spreading across the vintage lace like a disease. "There," she said with satisfaction. "Now you'll have to get a proper dress. I've already made an appointment at Kleinfeld's." The boutique erupted in chaos. Emma screamed. The seamstress frantically tried to help me out of the ruined dress. Daniel yelled at his mother, but I felt strangely calm as I watched my grandmother's beautiful dress dissolve under the bleach's assault. You see, I had something Patricia didn't know about, something I'd discovered during my late-night dives into the county's digital newspaper archives while researching local history for my classes. "Well," I said quietly, but somehow my voice cut through the chaos. "I suppose if we're talking about what's worthy of the Matthews name, this would be a good time to discuss your first marriage, Patricia. The one you had before you met Daniel's father." Patricia's face went white. The empty bleach bottle slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice trembled slightly. "Oh, I think you do." I carefully stepped down from the platform, ruined dress dripping bleach. Would anyone like to hear about Patricia's first wedding? It was quite the scandal in 1982. Small ceremony, very rushed. The groom was arrested during the reception. Something about stolen cars and insurance fraud. "That's enough," Patricia snapped, but I was just getting started. "The newspaper called it Wedding Ends in Handcuffs. Your first husband got 15 years, didn't he? And you testified against him for a reduced sentence in your own fraud charges. The article said you wore a dress from the discount rack at JCPenney." The boutique had gone completely silent. Daniel stared at his mother, shock written across his face. Emma had her phone out, no doubt already texting this juicy development to our friend group. "That's all in the past." Patricia's voice was barely a whisper. "Really? Because you legally changed your name and moved counties after the trial. Daniel's father never knew about your first marriage, did he? Or about the restitution payments you're still making to the fraud victims?" Patricia's perfectly maintained facade was cracking. She grabbed her bag and practically ran for the door, but I wasn't finished. "You know what the interesting thing is, Patricia? That discount rack dress you wore to your first wedding? It cost exactly what my grandmother paid for this dress in 1956. Adjusted for inflation, of course. I did the math." The boutique door slammed behind Patricia's retreating form. I finally looked at Daniel, worried about what I'd see on his face. But instead of anger, I saw him fighting back a smile. "So," he said, picking up the discarded bleach bottle. "I guess we both learned something new about Mom today." I burst out laughing, the tension of the moment breaking. "I'm sorry. I've known about this for months. I kept it as insurance, just in case." "In case she destroyed your wedding dress with bleach," Emma supplied helpfully. "Yeah," I sighed, looking down at the ruined lace. "I just never thought she'd actually go this far." Daniel wrapped his arms around me, careful to avoid the bleach-soaked areas. "I'm so sorry about your grandmother's dress. We'll fix this, I promise." The seamstress, who had been quietly observing the drama, finally spoke up. "You know, I might be able to save parts of it. We could incorporate pieces of the original lace into a new dress. Something old, something new." I felt tears welling up for the first time. "Really?" She nodded. "Give me 2 weeks. And honey?" She glanced at the door Patricia had fled through. "Make sure you get some good security cameras for the wedding. Something tells me this isn't over." Looking at Daniel's determined face and Emma's protective stance, I knew the seamstress was right. Patricia Matthews had just been publicly humiliated, her carefully constructed image shattered. She wouldn't take that lying down. But as I changed out of my ruined dress, I found myself smiling. Because what Patricia didn't know was that I had more newspaper clippings, many more. And if she wanted to play dirty, well, I hadn't spent years teaching history without learning a thing or two about how the past can come back to haunt you. The war for my wedding had just begun, and I had ammunition to spare. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of dress fittings and increasingly dramatic attempts by Patricia to regain control of her son's wedding. Each day brought a new crisis, but I was prepared for them all. When she called our venue pretending to be me and tried to cancel our reservation, I played them the recording of her bragging about doing the same thing to Daniel's sister's wedding years ago. The venue doubled our security deposit but promised to only take instructions in person. When she told our caterer we wanted to switch to her country club's preferred vendor, who coincidentally was her best friend's failing business, I showed them the health code violations she'd helped cover up. We kept our original caterer. But Patricia's real meltdown came when she discovered we'd uninvited her to the final dress fitting. I was standing in the boutique, admiring the seamstress's miraculous work. She'd managed to salvage my grandmother's lace, incorporating it into a new design that honored the original while creating something uniquely mine. Emma was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue when Patricia burst in, wielding what looked like a manila envelope. "I found something interesting at the Historical Society," she announced triumphantly, "about your precious grandmother's dress." I exchanged knowing looks with Emma. "We've been expecting this." "Let me guess," I said calmly, smoothing down the preserved lace panels. "You found the original receipt showing my grandmother bought the dress secondhand." Patricia's smirk faltered slightly. "You knew?" "Of course I knew. Grandma was proud of it. She was a war bride who came to America with nothing. Finding that beautiful dress in a consignment shop was her American dream story. She altered it herself, added the beading by hand. But it wasn't new." Patricia waved the envelope like a weapon. "You've been acting so superior about this family heirloom, and it was used when she bought it." "Mom." Daniel's voice cut through her rant. He stepped out from behind a rack of veils where he'd been hiding. "You need to stop." Patricia's face went from triumphant to horrified. "Daniel, you can't be here. It's bad luck to see the dress. Considering you destroyed the first one, I think we're past traditional superstitions," he said quietly. "What are you doing?" "I'm protecting you. This girl, she's not good enough for you. She's not good enough for our family. Living in that tiny house, teaching at a public school, wearing used dresses. Like your JCPenney discount rack special," Emma muttered under her breath. Patricia whirled on her. "You shut your mouth. That was different. I was young. I made mistakes." "Yes, you did." I agreed, stepping down from the fitting platform. "And you learned from them. You rebuilt your life, created a new identity, married Daniel's father, and became the perfect society wife. That's actually admirable." She blinked, thrown off by my unexpected praise. "But here's what I don't understand," I continued. "Why are you so desperate to stop Daniel from marrying someone who reminds you of your younger self?" The boutique went silent. Patricia's perfectly manicured hands trembled around the envelope. I am nothing like you, she whispered. Aren't you? Young woman from a modest background, marrying into money, trying to prove herself worthy. The only difference is I'm honest about who I am. And I'm not marrying Daniel for his family's money or status. Mom, Daniel moved closer to his mother. Kate found those newspaper articles months ago. She never used them against you, never threatened to expose your past. Not until you destroyed something precious to her. Patricia's carefully constructed walls began to crack. I worked so hard, her voice broke. So hard to forget that time, to become someone worthy of your father. When I see her, so confident in who she is, not trying to change or fit in, it reminds me of everything I gave up. You didn't have to give it up, I said gently. You chose to. Tears spilled down Patricia's cheeks, smearing her expensive mascara. Your father, she turned to Daniel, he never knew about any of it. He would have never married me if he'd known. You don't have that, Daniel said. Dad loved you for you, not for the perfect image you created. Just like I love Kate for who she is, not who you think she should be. Patricia sank into a nearby chair, her designer outfit suddenly looking like the costume it was. I've made such a mess of everything. Yes, I agreed, gathering my skirts to sit beside her. But it's not too late to fix it. She looked at me suspiciously. Why would you even want me at your wedding after everything I've done? Because you're Daniel's mother, because everyone deserves a second chance, and because I smiled. I have a feeling there's a pretty amazing woman hiding under all that designer armor. Patricia stared at me for a long moment, then surprised us all by laughing. You know, my first wedding dress really was from the JCPenney discount rack. I thought it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Tell me about it, I asked softly, and there, surrounded by white tulle and scattered beads from my restored dress, Patricia Matthews finally let her mask slip. She told us about being young and in love, about making mistakes and paying for them, about rebuilding herself from nothing, just like my grandmother had. As she talked, I saw Daniel watching his mother with new eyes, seeing the real woman beneath the perfect facade for the first time. Emma quietly slipped out, sensing this was a private family moment. When Patricia finally ran out of words, she looked at my dress with different eyes. The seamstress did beautiful work, she admitted. The way she incorporated the old lace, it tells a story. Like you, I said. A story of something precious being made new again. She stood up, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. I should go. You probably have more fitting to do. She paused at the door. Kate? That article you found. There are others. I know. Would you like to hear those stories too? Over coffee, maybe. I smiled. I'd like that very much. As she left, Daniel wrapped his arms around me. You're amazing, you know that? I know, I grinned. But we should probably still keep those security cameras for the wedding. Baby steps. He laughed and kissed me. Baby steps. The morning of our wedding dawned bright and clear. I was in the bridal suite, surrounded by bridesmaids and floating layers of restored lace, when there was a soft knock at the door. Patricia stood there, looking uncharacteristically nervous, holding a vintage hat box. Over the past few weeks, our coffee talks had revealed a different side of my mother-in-law. Behind the society matron facade was a woman who clawed her way up from nothing, made devastating mistakes, and rebuilt herself through sheer determination. In some ways, she was more like me than either of us had initially wanted to admit. I brought something, she said, placing the hat box on the vanity, if you'd like to use it. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a delicate lace veil, yellowed with age but still beautiful. Is this? I touched it gently. From the JCPenney discount rack? She smiled wryly. Yes, it's the only thing I kept from that day. Not because of him, but because it was the first beautiful thing I ever bought for myself. Emma, who was adjusting my hair, froze. We all knew what this gesture meant. The something borrowed tradition. Patricia continued, her voice slightly unsteady. I thought, well, it's certainly old, and it has quite a story behind it. I lifted the veil carefully. Are you sure? I've spent too many years hiding who I was, being ashamed of my past. Maybe it's time both this veil and I step into the light. As Emma helped secure the veil in my hair, I caught Patricia wiping away a tear. You know, she said, your grandmother's lace and my discount rack veil together, they make quite a statement. About second chances, I suggested. About authenticity, she corrected. Something I'm finally learning to appreciate. The ceremony was perfect, not because everything went according to plan, but because it went according to our story. Patricia walked Daniel down the aisle, wearing a simple dress that looked nothing like her usual designer outfits, but somehow made her look younger, more real. During the reception, she clinked her glass for a toast. The room went quiet, probably expecting another carefully curated society speech. Instead, she took a deep breath and surprised everyone. When I first met Kate, I saw her as a threat to everything I built. The perfect life, the perfect family image, the perfect lies. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. But Kate taught me something valuable. Our imperfections, our histories, our so-called mistakes, they're not things to hide. They're the parts that make our stories worth telling. She turned to me, tears glinting in her eyes. My new daughter-in-law wears a dress made from her grandmother's salvaged lace and a veil with its own complicated history. Like the women wearing them, these pieces aren't perfect. They're authentic, and that makes them beautiful. Later, as Daniel and I swayed to our first dance, I caught sight of Patricia showing her sister the newspaper clippings I'd found. She was laughing, actually laughing, as she pointed out her younger self in the grainy photos. "Look at that dress," I heard her say. "You know, it wasn't actually that bad for $89.99. The photographer captured that moment, Patricia surrounded by family, finally sharing her true story, while Daniel and I danced wrapped in layers of restored lace and second-hand dreams. It became my favorite wedding photo, not despite the journey it took to get there, but because of it. As the evening wound down, Patricia pulled me aside. "I had this whole plan, to mold you into the perfect Matthew's wife, like I'd molded myself." "I know. How's that working out for you?" She chuckled. "Terribly. Thank goodness." She squeezed my hand. "Thank you for showing me there's more than one way to be worthy of love." "You taught me something too," I admitted. "Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is let our guard down and let people see who we really are. Even if who we are bought their wedding dress from JCPenney. Especially then." As Daniel and I left the reception under a shower of rose petals, I caught one last glimpse of Patricia. She was dancing with her husband, her carefully maintained society persona nowhere in sight. Instead, I saw a woman finally comfortable in her own skin, wearing her real story as proudly as I wore her veil. Some might say my mother-in-law ruined my wedding dress, but I think she helped create something better. A family where authenticity trumps perfection, where past mistakes become stepping stones to wisdom, and where love isn't measured by designer labels or social status, but by the courage it takes to be genuinely ourselves. And that's worth more than any dress, new or secondhand, could ever be.